Huh?
It's all about the advertising.
Hey. Get it. Let's go. Are you ready? Huh? Call the meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning Zoning Commission for the November 12th meeting. Public comment. Citizens who desire to address the City Council Board of Commission with regards to matters on the agenda will be received at this time. The request to speak form is to be given to the City Secretary or designee prior to the beginning of the meeting. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and speakers requiring a translator will have 6 minutes regardless of the number of agenda items to be addressed. Comments or discussion by the City Council Board or Commission members will only be made at the time the subject is scheduled for consideration. And just for the record, you guys might see that we cannot limit the number of speakers. It used to be 10, and new legislation, thanks to our state government. Sorry about that. Item 3, minutes. Consideration of and action on the minutes of the October 24th, 2019 meeting.
Oh, excuse me,
Huh?
Mr. Chair. Could you just make sure that you open it for public comment?
Well, I see you. Okay. Does anybody in the audience want to come speak? Thank you. So now, item 3, minutes. Consideration action minutes on the October 24th, 2019 meeting. Got a motion to approve?
Second.
Got a second? Any comments or any corrections? Hearing none, we'll vote if we'll can get our. Uh-oh. What's all this?
Go ahead and just remind.
Restart?
No, don't do that. Yeah. Hit that.
Remind me tomorrow.
Remind me tomorrow. You won't be here tomorrow.
Still won't do it.
Do it again.
Where did that come up from?
Yeah.
Oh. Jesus Christ. It passes with 2 members absent being, anyhow. All right. Public hearing and recommendation. Public hearing, receive and hear all persons. Well, you're going to go ahead, Doug, then we'll open it.
No, you go ahead and read that. Yes, sir.
Public hearing, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard regarding proposed amendments to the City of Sugar Land Development Code, Chapter 2, Article 11, parking garages, to add interior parking garage lighting provisions for reducing unwanted glare and providing for parking garage safety.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Members of the commission and Mr. Vice Chair, tonight we are going to look at part 2 of this parking garage lighting amendment, and going to provide a little bit of a recap. As y'all probably remember, we talked with y'all in workshop format back in September about some ordinance work that the city was proposing for parking garage lighting. So for the record, I'm going to recap a little bit of that. We'll try to keep that brief. But we talked about the city has standards in terms of parking lot lighting for light trespass, to make sure that areas around a commercial property does not have light trespass or glare. We have, especially near residential areas, those are included in our development code, and we have been examining internal lighting in parking garages, which are, as we know, more of an open or partially open structure. There's a variety of lighting that we have in different parking garages, different styles, some much older than others. While we don't think there's a large-scale issue in terms of this time for exterior glare, we believe these safeguards can help put in place. Research has shown that it's not as much of a light trespass with literally lighting up a property, but is more of a placement shielding to prevent glare for that. And as we said at your September 10th meeting, we talked with you all about the proposed amendment we were working on. We talked a little bit about some of the current codes as far as parking garages and how at a minimum garages are required to be screened along the sides. The city does not allow just the, some you see in Houston, which is just the cables that separate the cars from at each level. We do require exterior walls of at least 42 inches up, but still, most of the garages are at least partly open. If a person wanted to do an all-enclosed garage, whether underground, less likely here due to water table, but underground or let's say more enclosed, there's quite a bit of ventilation requirements that kick in, so that's not something that we tend to see. We talked a little bit about some of the trends that we are seeing in terms of retrofitting older systems. LED, much more energy efficient, does not produce the heat that other bulbs may. We're seeing more of that. And we're seeing a little bit more of the pendant style lighting where, again, the lighting is not as nested up necessarily between the cross beams, may hang lower depending on how an applicant is designing. So we did get some commission feedback. We had some valuable feedback in terms of one of the things that was brought up was, what about wall pack lighting? We see that more on the exterior of buildings, and in that case, we do have some full shielding so that the lens is not below any of that shielding. Again, we've primarily dealt with that on the exterior of a building. But we thought that was a good approach. You could have some of that inside and could end up having some negative effects nearby, exterior. Another thing that was brought up was the idea of having a minimum amount of lighting safety. One of the things that we have in our surface parking lots is some minimum what we call foot candles, which is a square foot lighting in essentially a square foot area. And so we wanted to look into that too. We talked a little bit about some of the city's energy codes and building codes that do apply in terms of helping energy efficiency as well for some retrofitting. So we have done that additional research and revisions. I'm recapping just a little bit here of some of the past. Again, we talked a little bit about use of more of that pendant style fixtures that we're beginning to see where, again, you have more of a pendant. It's not like the older fluorescent lights that either hang pretty close or are mounted flush, and the LED, as we said. So here is just a simple graphic illustrating what we wouldn't want, and that is if we have some type of pendant that essentially has an unshielded light below the beams here in a cross beam in a garage. These are a few examples of some recent products. Again, sometimes you have literally a flush-mounted cabinet. You could have a flush-mounted or, again, on some type of pendant. We're not mandating specific fixtures. We don't want to get into that. We believe the market is good for that, and there's plenty of different designs that can comply. What we believe is that the lighting can be handled either structurally through recessing it above the beams, like this drawing shows, where we don't have near as much glare projected, or through some type of shielding, just like we would if this was a parking lot light outdoors. We also have added, as we said, the wall pack lighting example. So if you're in a parking garage or you're out on the exterior of a wall, it'd be the same type of regulations. And again, here's a few other products that are becoming more common. There's just a lot more different styles, and some, again, look almost more of what you'd think of in an interior of a regular building. We do believe it's pretty straightforward. There's different ways you can do, although we don't see a lot of flat parking garage ceiling roofs here. That is that can be built. You can build thicker and that. So if you, whether you wanted to have some type of pendant projecting lower, or if there's not much of a crossbeam, that shielding would be appropriate. Either way, we're trying to, again, just think of those different scenarios that would be able to be in place. So I mentioned that we did some updating, some additional research. We looked at, again, the simple full cutoff shielding, mentioning that as an additional provision. In terms of looking at minimum amount of lighting, we consulted some technical data in terms of the Illuminating Engineers Society, which is not something we commonly talk about, but IES, which has some specifics for different styles. They recommend not less than a foot candle for covered type parking. Again, that's what we're proposing. And we also did some audits to see what type of things have gone through plan review in terms of the city, including some garages that have been approved but not yet built. And we found that we were in alignment with something that was reasonable there. What we're not getting into in this part is things with the building code in terms of stairwells, elevators. Those already have quite a bit with the building and fire codes. So we don't want to duplicate a lot of that. But we want to make sure that, per the commission questions there, that we do have a minimum that you can count on, and generally they'll go higher than that. We do think that's a good safety catch, so to speak. But we are also not proposing something that's going to create a bunch of problems either that we're trying to eliminate. So this doesn't replace any minimum requirements in the building and fire codes, but this would be able to set a garage lighting, which, again, the fact is that garages are generally at least 40 to 50% open on each floor. So we do need to hold a public hearing on this. We have completed the requirements in terms of the notifications. At this point in time, as I speak this evening, we have not received inquiries about it. But we do believe with the fact that we did have the workshop, we got some very valuable feedback, and we've integrated that in. We'd like to have the commission, following the hearing, consider and act on this this evening to be able to move this toward City Council if the commission agrees with the proposed language. The best case would be a council hearing sometime in December. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions after the hearing. We'll want to go ahead and open up the public hearing for any feedback, and then we'll close that.
We'll now open the public hearing and ask anyone who would like to speak on this item to come forth. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and go into consideration and action on a recommendation for proposed amendments to the City of Sugar Land Development Code, Chapter 2, Article 11, Parking Garage, to add interior parking garage lighting provisions for reducing unwanted glare and providing for parking garage safety to the mayor and members of City Council. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or anything? None down here? Any down?
Just a real quick clarifying question, Doug. On can you remind me we were thinking about this. Did we ever consider revisions to the building code or to the external components of parking garage in order to deal with some of the spillage effects? Because this is all the interior lighting. Can you just refresh my memory?
As far as any exterior, we basically have the minimum amount of screening and things that are shaped already in the development code. In this case, typically that takes care of the majority of any spillover. And we certainly have, if you mount any lights on the outside or that top deck, if you've got parking that's open that doesn't have some type of cover on the top, we already have the regulations, we already have the standards for that. This is really getting at this unique hybrid where you've got it's a building, but it's fundamentally open on each floor, at least somewhat. So that's where this is trying to target.
AP. Doug?
Yes, sir.
Follow up on Taylor's question. You've got these, what do you call them, beams?
Yes, sir.
In these examples, is that beam, is that distance, or that depth, or whatever you want to call it, in the building code? In other words, if somebody came in and wanted to build a garage, are these beams dimensioned in the building code? In other words, you got these lights, but you're showing these beams as being part of the enclosure to help with these lights. So my question, is the beam a requirement in this situation? I mean, how do you control, otherwise, if the beam's not dimensioned, how do we know that what lights they're using?
Right.
You still won't have spillage or something. I'm trying to
Right,
tie
trying-
the two together. I'm not, maybe not making myself clear.
No, I'm on with you there. Typically, that is the type of construction we do see. The building code does not mandate that they have to build it with that type of cross beams, and that's why we're saying here that if you have, for some reason, a flat ceiling, which you can find occasionally around the Houston area, due to maybe the concrete's thicker or they've got a different set of a building, then we need the shielding no matter what. So these drawings are an example here of if you do have beams and you are either nesting it up or below it with shielding, but we also had the provision that, again, you either, if extending below the garage ceiling beams, or if the parking garage does not have exposed beams. So we went ahead and put that scenario in the language, so just in case they have constructed a much thicker ceiling where we do not have this visible beam, we've got the trigger for the shielding in place. So one way or another.
So you can adjust the light itself? Is that what you're saying?
Right, or have shielding on the side if they're going to not have a beam on either side. We wanted to address that scenario because we don't see a lot of that construction, but it's certainly something somebody could do.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just a question. So basically, this winds up with a full cutoff, whether it be a wall pack or in the ceiling. We're looking for downlighting on basically everything.
Right, right. And in some cases, again, the beams fundamentally shield that.
Sure.
But it's to target that area in terms of avoiding that, because if you can see the fixtures, and again, we couldn't screen from if someone's on an overpass and for some reason they're looking in, but we think this will minimize that, especially if we get to see a lot more retrofitting, which we think we will. There's just energy savings in the LED and newer construction. And again, it's that security. We want to be secure in the garage, but we also don't want to have that be a kind of a nuisance situation. This is less about residential proximity. This is not necessarily, we don't have a lot of garages that back up to houses. It's really from, again, anywhere around that is to try to keep that light more focused internally.
And I think we had asked the last time, are there any other municipalities that have taken this up? I think at that time you said there was maybe one in Dallas that was looking at this, in the Dallas area?
We were surprised at how little that has been done so far that we could find. We found a number of out-of-state things in terms of that, but again, the older traditional style, generally it hasn't been much of an issue because that's just tended to be nested up there, but we think that's going to change. So we are a little bit on the cutting edge on this. At the same time, we didn't want to go too far and mandate specific fixtures. We don't want to tell the development community, you've got to use this brand X or this other thing. That's how we get in trouble. And we've avoided that here always. But again, you can do it different ways, but you've got to account for it during the plan review and inspection. You bet.
So you think this will work, huh?
We think it will. We think it's a reasonable safeguard we don't have right now.
All right. Any other? All right. So I guess we're ready for consideration and action on a recommendation for the proposed amendments to the City of Sugar Land Development Code. Chapter 2, Article 11, parking garages to add interior parking garage lighting provision for reducing unwanted glare and providing for parking garage safety to the mayor and members of city council.
Motion for such.
Got a motion? Second. Motion by motion to, and seconded. Okay, any comments or questions? We'll vote at this time then. I think I will, if I can find, get down there. Why am I having all this trouble, Jake? Now I can't get my,
There it
or it's way up there in the corner.
is. Go slow. There you
I was driving too fast. What the hell's wrong with me today? Where's mine? Passed unanimously of those who are present. All right. Item 5. Fact findings and recommendations. A consideration of action on a recommendation for proposed rezoning from interim standard single-family residential R11 or R1I to permanent zero lot line single-family residential R1Z for approximately 21 acres at the southwest corner of Eldridge Road and West Airport Boulevard to the mayor and members of city council. Laura Waller, Planner 1.
Good evening again. So we are revisiting the approximately 21 acres at Airport and Eldridge. So that's this black blob right here. It's it's 20.64 acres, and it is informally known as the Silva Tract, if you know anything about it. It was annexed in 2002 as part of the airport extension from, so airport used to stop here at Eldridge, so to extend it all the way through to the Glen Laurel area over here. It's currently R1I because it was never developed, and the proposed zoning by the new property owners is R1Z. It is currently vacant raw land. As I said, it was never developed. So we did hold a public hearing on October 24th. One member of the public spoke. They were concerned with possible multifamily or condo development, as well as the property values of their own home. They live in Greenbrier. The commission feedback included that we talked to the speaker and as well as a more legible copy of the survey and meets and bounds. So after the meeting, I, as well as the property owner's representative, did speak with the concerned citizen and assured him that it was indeed going to be single family and that it, if anything, his property values should increase because of the new areas going in behind his home. So this is the survey of the 20.6418 acres. This is Greenbrier, and then this is a ditch area here, and then reserve at Glen Laurel. Across the street, we have Harmony High School and a Walgreens, and then again over here is some light neighborhood commercial church and a gas station. The future land use map of the city, and then we'll zoom in to the top. It is compatible with the rest of the area. They're also suburban neighborhood, Greenbrier and Glen Laurel. And it can be supported by the neighborhood commercial areas that are across the street and across the intersection. The site photographs, we still have the public hearing sign out because there's one coming up for city council if you approve it or recommend it. And then there's, as you can see, there's just a lot of dense wooded area. So a lot of underbrush and primarily softwood trees along this road all the way up to the very edge. Just for your edification, R1Z standards do differ slightly from the standard R1. Slightly smaller minimums. Lot area is 5,000 rather than 6,000. Lot width is 50 rather than 60, and depth is 100 versus 110. The maximum coverage is 50% rather than 40%. But the most distinct thing is that the home is sided with at least 51% of the home on the property line and the other side 10 feet off, rather than the more standard 5 and 5 foot on either side. So you would have a large side yard. So that is the primary difference. Although it's not as noticeable from the street as you would think. So points for consideration tonight. The tract was annexed in 2002, and permanent zoning is now required prior to development. It is unplatted, undeveloped, and so we need to have it formally zoned before we can move forward with platting. The proposed zoning is the request of the property owner to build 0 lot line, single-family patio-style homes, and it is supported by the thoroughfare future land use map and is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan. Therefore, staff recommends a recommendation of approval to the mayor and city council. We will hold, or I can answer any questions you have. There is no public hearing. This is just the CNA.
Any questions down there?
I do have a question. I'm not sure what I can ask at this point, but I drove by there. There are no turn-ins on there. So when you say 0 lot lines, I guess they'll be facing airport?
No. So there will be additional streets put in inside it. So there will not be any 0 lot lines along an arterial street. There's a 25-foot building setback from there, minimum.
That was my question. Okay, thank you.
Dan, you got any?
No, I'm sorry. No.
AP? Jay?
I had one question on one of your exhibits here. There's a vertical line that in about 2/3 of the property.
Yes, it is technically 2 parcels according to the central appraisal or the county appraisal district. So that is why there's a line there, because in GIS, it's divided into 2 parcels for the appraisal district.
Okay.
But it is, and it will be platted as one area. Yes.
It wasn't on the survey, so,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, I had to, because your write-up said it consists of 2 parcels, but as you say, the survey doesn't reflect that. Other question, did you have any more, Jay? The other question, you got buildings, the building setbacks, and I think I asked this in the first meeting. You got a 10-foot rear yard
Yes,
setback
yes,
for the building,
yes,
but you could have a 14-foot UE back there.
correct. In which case, the home would have to honor the 14-foot UE.
So how are you going to have this is in conflict with the 14-foot UE. You'd be putting, okay, if they go by this, you could have it.
So in that case, the
10
utility
feet would
easement
be
stands.
4 feet into the 14-foot UE.
Right, but in that case, the utility easement stands as the rear yard setback. You cannot encroach on a utility easement unless you have permission. So the utility easement
I've
stands.
never seen it with it set like, read like that when you know you might have that, so
That's the same in all of our residential districts. If there's an easement that's more, then that's what you have to do. But generally, the building line, these are, no matter what, any property in the city that's zoned
Now, I
R1Z.
can understand if it
has
was
to-
a split, you'd have a
Right.
7.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's okay,
So-
but I just.
These are the minimums, but there could be additional easements, and there generally always are. So, but that's how the entire zoning ordinance works for all the residential.
All right. Let them build over it, and I don't care, CenterPoint will tear it out for them. Anyhow, all right. Okay, where are we at now? So no more questions. So the consideration of and action on the recommendation for proposed rezoning from interim standard single-family residential R1I to permanent zoning, permanent 0 lot line, single-family residential R1Z for approximately 21 acres at the southwest corner of Eldridge Road and West Airport to the mayor and members of city council. Do we have a motion to recommend this to the zoning change to the city, mayor and city council? Have a motion by Dan, second? Second by AP. Any? Dan's made it and AP seconded it. Any other comments or questions before we vote? All right, we'll vote at this time. And I still got my damn, here we go. Motion passed unanimously of the members present. Item 6, reports. Planning and Zoning Commission liaison report, city council meeting November 5th. I have no clue.
That would be me. And so Very exciting meeting that several of us were at. Points of notice were the oath of office, and then the ethics training. And just a reminder that when in doubt, get a get out of jail free card, which I think I actually have 2 of those. And then a celebration and acknowledgement of Alan Bogard's 19 years of service. Everything on the consent agenda passed 7-0. 2 issues that were concerning that we had talked about in our budget planning. One was contract was approved to double the budget amount for a bridge at the airport, where they under budgeted by half. And council went ahead and approved it. They also approved, and I guess we'll see soon, a new piece of artwork in the lobby hanging from the ceiling. And then the hike and bike bond proposal that was part of the parks presentation is now been roughly converted into a sidewalk enhancement with 2 tunnel plan. So the basics behind the original referendum that went to the public has basically been done away with, and it's going to be expanded sidewalks throughout Sugar Land. So that's my report.
All right, thank you. City staff report?
Just real quickly, appreciate the commissioners that were able to make the Texas APA this year. It was a really good conference there in Waco. It seemed like everybody enjoyed that. We are looking at, we'll have 1 meeting in December for the Planning and Zoning Commission. They're the second week. That should be the only one, unless for some reason there's something with plating that we're not aware of right now. So that's all we have. We hope everybody has a really good Thanksgiving coming up, because we won't meet until after that. But that's all we have.
All right, that's it. Motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Motion and second. We're adjourned.